Elias Vance knew the hum of the chronal displacement unit better than his own heartbeat. It was a comfort, a constant in a life defined by temporal chaos. His mission was simple: observe, record, and subtly correct historical anomalies. He'd seen empires rise and fall, witnessed forgotten wonders, and danced with dinosaurs. But nothing had prepared him for her. His first encounter with her was in a rain-slicked alley in 1888 London. He was tracking a minor ripple, a misplaced Victorian-era invention that threatened to derail the Industrial Revolution. She was there first, a shadowy figure dismantling the device with unnerving precision. When he confronted her, she moved like a phantom, a glint of a silver dagger in the gaslight. And then she was gone, leaving him with a slashed sleeve and a gnawing curiosity. Who was she? And how did she know about the device? Years later, or rather centuries earlier for Elias, he found her again in the scorching sands of ancient Egypt. He was trying to prevent the collapse of a critical trade route. She was disguised as a temple guard, her eyes impossibly ancient and knowing, watching him from under a linen headpiece. This time their clash was more direct. Swords met, sparks flew, and the air crackled not just with the desert heat, but with an unspoken animosity. She fought with the weary grace of someone who had fought 1,000 battles, yet her strength was undiminished. He escaped, barely, leaving her with a grudging respect and a growing suspicion. He started seeing her everywhere, across different eras. A fierce warrior in a Roman legion, a silent assassin in feudal Japan, a brilliant scientist in a futuristic metropolis. Each time their paths intertwined, often in conflict, as if they were both drawn to the same points of temporal instability. She seemed to know his movements, almost anticipating his interventions. He started leaving subtle markers, traps that only another time traveler would recognize. But she always disarmed them, leaving behind a single, unsettling symbol: a coiled serpent, devouring its own tail. One frigid night in the heart of the Russian Revolution, a temporal storm erupted. Elias found himself stranded, his chronal unit damaged, surrounded by swirling paradoxes. He was defenseless, expecting her to finally deliver the killing blow. Instead, she appeared, not as an enemy, but as a silent protector. She fought off the temporal anomalies, her movements a blur against the chaotic backdrop, until the storm subsided. Then, without a word, she offered him a small, intricate device, a temporal capacitor, far more advanced than anything he possessed. "We are not so different, you and I, Elias Vance," she said, her voice a low murmur that seemed to echo through time itself. "We both seek to preserve something." He never saw her as an enemy after that. Their encounters became less frequent, but more profound. They would share a silent meal in a bustling medieval market, exchange cryptic warnings in the quiet corridors of a space station, or simply observe a sunset over a long-dead civilization together. He learned her name was Lyra, a name that shimmered with age and mystery. She never spoke of her origins, only hinted at a burden she had carried for millennia, a silent observer of humanity's triumphs and follies. She never aged, her eyes holding the weight of countless centuries, yet her spirit remained fiercely independent. One day, in a serene, untamed wilderness, millions of years in Earth's past, as they watched a colossal creature graze in the distance, Elias asked her, "What exactly are you trying to preserve, Lyra?" She turned to him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "Not humanity, Elias. Not history, not even time itself. I preserve a truth that exists beyond all of it, a truth that, if forgotten, would unravel reality itself. Shorty P. Copy. Google usercontent.com. Image generation. Content 70. She gestured towards the horizon, where strange, impossibly tall structures, unlike anything he'd ever seen, pierced the purple sky. And some truths, she whispered, her gaze distant and troubled, are best left undisturbed. Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ancient air. He knew then that their shared journey had only just begun, and the mysteries of Lyra and the ancient truth she guarded were far more terrifying and profound than he could ever imagine. The silence of the primordial world was a heavy, living thing, broken only by the distant bellow of a creature Elias couldn't name and the soft tread of their feet on damp earth. He followed Lyra towards the impossible structures, monoliths of a material that seemed to drink the light, their surfaces unnervingly smooth and cold to the touch. They weren't built, they seemed to have grown, their geometry subtly wrong, twisting in ways that made his eyes water and his stomach churn. "They are tombs," Lyra said, her voice a near whisper, devoid of its usual cryptic confidence. Or perhaps anchors. Places where the veil between what is and what should not be is thinnest. Inside the nearest monolith, there was no dust, no sign of age, only a cavernous, echoing chamber. The air was frigid, and Elias's breath plumed. In the center of the room, carved into the floor, was a sigil. It was a labyrinth of intersecting lines and maddening curves that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves at the edge of his vision. As Elias stared, a migraine bloomed behind his eyes, and with it came a psychic echo, not a sound but a feeling. It was the crushing weight of a consciousness vast, ancient, and utterly malevolent. He felt a sliver of its hunger, a desire not to consume, but to unravel, to reduce all of existence to a screaming, chaotic void. He stumbled back, gasping. "What is that?" "The truth I preserve," Lyra answered, her face pale. "A prisoner. Time as you know it, the linear progression, the cause and effect, is the wall of its cell. The Ouroboros is not a circle of life. It is the lock on the cage." Suddenly, Elias understood. The anomalies he'd been correcting his whole career weren't just historical hiccups. They were cracks, scratches on the prison wall, made from the inside, and he and Lyra, on opposite sides, had been unknowingly acting as the universe's janitors, patching the damage. Before he could process the enormity of it, a frantic alarm chirped from his wrist-mounted chronal unit. But the reading was wrong. Instead of the clean, sharp signature of a temporal displacement, the display showed a jagged, corrupted waveform, like a scream turned into data. "Where?" Lyra demanded, her focus instantly sharpening. "Alexandria." 30 BCE, Elias stammered. "But the signature, it's septic. It feels sick." The jump was jarring. They materialized not in the sun-drenched streets of the Ptolemaic capital, but in the cool, papyrus-scented halls of its great library. The anomaly was not a misplaced artifact, but a man, a Greek scholar in a quiet alcove, his eyes wide with a frantic, unholy light. He wasn't reading or studying, he was transcribing, his stylus flying across a fresh scroll with terrifying speed, his lips moving in a silent, ceaseless chant. Lyra put a hand on Elias's arm, her touch icy. "Don't look at the scroll. At the..." Elias couldn't help it. He caught a glimpse of the symbols. They were kin to the sigil in the monolith, diagrams of impossible physics and star charts, pointing to vast, dark oceans between galaxies. A wave of vertigo washed over him. The scholar looked up, his eyes locking onto Elias. and for a second, Elias didn't see a man, but a gaping hole in reality, a window into the void beyond. "It sings the silence," the scholar whispered, a voice that was not his own rasping from his throat. "It is the shape in the gaps." As he spoke, the world around him began to fray. The precise lines of the library's columns wavered like cloth in a breeze. The light from the oil lamps bent at unnatural angles, casting shadows that possessed too many joints and moved with a slithering, independent life. The air grew thick, smelling of ozone and something ancient, like dust from a dead star. "It's using him as a foothold," Lyra yelled, shoving Elias back. "A way to push its influence through." This wasn't a historical correction. This was an exorcism. Lyra moved, and for the first time Elias saw her true nature. Her body shimmered, and a faint silver light, like captive starlight, enveloped her hands. She spoke, not in any language Elias knew, but in a series of resonant, powerful syllables that made the very atoms in the air vibrate. She wasn't attacking the scholar, but the space around him, weaving a net of temporal energy, forcing the corrupted reality back into its proper shape. The entity fought back. A psychic shriek tore through the library, shattering scrolls and extinguishing lamps. Elias felt it clawing at the edges of his own sanity, promising him knowledge of every, when, and everywhere. If only he would let it in. He grit his teeth, focusing on the hum of his own chronal unit, the one constant in his chaotic life, using it as an anchor against the tide of madness. With a final, explosive cry, Lyra slammed her palms together. The silver light flared, collapsing inward and sealing the breach. The scholar slumped forward onto the table, dead. The shadows snapped back to their rightful owners, the columns solidified, and silence returned to the library. Lyra sagged against a bookshelf, the silver light fading from her. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked tired, millennia tired. On the floor lay a fragment of the corrupted scroll that had torn away in the blast. Elias cautiously picked it up. It wasn't just gibberish. Part of it was a map, not of the world, but of the timeline itself, marking specific points in history. There were dozens of them. One glowed with a faint residual malevolence, Alexandria. And across the timeline, another point had just begun to blink, a faint, pulsing red. Lyra looked at the map, then at Elias, her ancient eyes holding a flicker of something he had never seen in them before. Fear. "It knows we can see it now," she said, her voice strained. "The prisoner is no longer just testing the bars of its cage. It's looking for the wardens,